Thank you very much, Tony, and welcome all. I'm Vicky Price. I'm on the advisory group for Better Statistics, and it's my pleasure to open this conference. The objectives are really to find out where we are with net zero, what are the statistics telling us, and how we're progressing on this. And we have some very eminent people talking through the day on this. But just to remind you, really, in terms of what Better Statistics is all about, it's there to educate people as to the value of reliable statistics. Well, I used to work for the government, and I can tell you that was very important, and evidence-based policies is really what we should be aiming for. It doesn't always happen. But of course, in terms of increasing the value of the understanding, if you like, of reliable statistics, to a considerable extent, it does require a lot of discussion, debate, and engagement. And I think Better Statistics is there to question various figures that appear at various stages and what the methodology is. And I think it's doing that, reasonably effectively. And we've seen that in previous events as well, happening where, the ONS and others are being encouraged to tell us how they're moving in various areas, and we do a lot in between. So it's not just what happens at conferences. A lot of debate goes on between Tony Dent in particular, who's over there, and the unfortunate statistician who's putting things together, and things open up as a result. So, but of course, in terms of understanding also the value of statistics and whether they are improving, we also encourage people to participate in surveys that assist, because what we really want to check is the reliability of data and therefore question it. And as I suggested, a lot of the time is spent challenging poorly prepared or poorly presented published statistics. And you've seen, of course, even quite recently, the Prime Minister taken to task for suggesting all sorts of things about what's happening to the debt to GDP ratio, for example, and over what period, and whether it has come down or is coming down or not, and not just him, but the Chief Secretary to the Treasury and lots of others. So we have an important role to play. In terms of how it's run, just to remind everybody, there are directors of Better Statistics, which include Tony Dent and Phyllis McFarland, who's over there, and Ian Mackey, who's over there, and they have been seriously, enthusing all the rest of us to be involved in this. Without their very substantial efforts, we wouldn't be having this type of conference or the influence that we do believe we already have. And one of the people involved in the advisory committee, which also include Simon Briscoe, Sir Vince Cable, and Sir John Curtis, who are often at these events, and add a political dimension to some of the importance, if you like, of the data that comes out and how to question it. So it is a pretty serious undertaking. I used to be a joint head of the Government Economic Service. In my department, where I was in business, we had the statisticians, of course, the operational researchers, and everyone else working very closely together, although, of course, there is a head of statistics across government. But the importance of not just looking at stats, but also looking at what the implications are for economic policy are very, very important. So in terms of how we're going to run this, hopefully we've caught up a little bit since we start a little bit late by me not dwelling on this for too long. We have a few keynote speeches and then questioning what progress perhaps we're measuring and how we're actually measuring that progress. And the first person I'd like to invite is Professor Piers Forster, who is chair of UK Climate Change Committee and director at the Priestley International Centre for Climate at Leeds University. So over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And good morning, everyone. So I'm the interim chair of the Climate Change Committee, and it's really good to be here today. I really want to learn from the experts. I'm pretty sure a lot of you are very aware of our committee. We are the independent advisors to Parliament, set up by the Climate Change Act in 2008. And it's our job to recommend targets both for mitigation and adaptation to the government. And I would think at a committee we have been quite successful at persuading successive governments to adopt our targets. And I think quite a lot of that does come from, as you talk about in introduction, really good evidence-based technical analysis that talked about where we are, where we are going, and what we have to do to get to the kind of targets. And so I think the more we can do together to try and get consistency across our different organizations about the different numbers we report and the way we present them and the way we talk about these are I think the more effective we will be at persuading government. And I think when you look back at the kind of Prime Minister's speech in September and things, I think we don't only have to persuade government, we also have to persuade the population as well. So we have to find ways of talking about the numbers that do take our population with us. So if you looked at the press in the last couple of days, I've actually congratulated the government, and this isn't something we often do as a committee, and this is because we have successfully got kind of halfway to our net zero 2050 target, and this comes from switching from kind of coal to natural gas and building lots of offshore wind. So the government like to say they're at the forefront of all developed economies and they're doing really, really well. But we try and point out to them that we have big challenges to come. So and it is those kind of challenges that I want to talk to you about today. In fact, I should have said before I started, in fact, that myself, I'm a kind of climate kind of scientist by background, and the other aspect of our work, not only the decarbonisation journey, is to try and look at where we are and how can climate change is affecting all of us. And if you look at the world temperatures, we're currently at 1.5 degrees above where they were at kind of pre-industrial times, and that is down to human activity pretty much. We think about 0.2 of that 1.5 degrees is to do by kind of chance, but 1.3 is down to human activity, and we are seeing all the impacts of that occurring today. And that is really why there's such an urgency to decarbonise. So I was very interested in kind of Tony, your kind of survey that talks about what is the public opinion about those threats to climate change. So I think we have a real kind of duty to try and explain what the impact of climate change will be for all of us to come. Yeah, okay, so I will now go back to this net zero kind of journey. So if you have a look at what we need to do to get the net zero targets, we have to do the four distinct activities. The first is we have to increase our efficiencies and reduce our demand for kind of energy. The next thing we have to do, we have to expand our electricity generating capability as fast as possible, and that quicker we electrify everything, the more efficiency that comes with that electrification component. The other thing, we have to really try and replace our high carbon industries and our high carbon assets with lower carbon alternatives. And that isn't going to get us there completely. So we will have some residual emissions that we have to compensate for in some way. So we have to do these nature-based solutions, and we have to look at these kind of carbon removal technologies as well and scale up these as fast as possible. And if you do this diagram does split up the journey into the different sectors of the economy, and we will have speeches later on today that talk about the different sectors. But the thing I want to get across is that pretty much all the sectors of the economy have to get to almost kind of zero emissions. The only two sectors we think aren't capable of that are the first of the aviation industry, where we think for these long haul journeys it will be very challenging to develop a kind of zero carbon alternative in time. And the other thing is agriculture, which, because of our love of eating beef burgers and other things, it will be quite difficult to decarbonize agriculture. So we have to have these negative emissions there. So what can we do to try and accelerate this delivery? And this is really the kind of the challenge we present to the government. This chart shows the emission changes outside of the electricity supply sector, which is on track. The other sectors are not on track, and this does indicate what we have achieved in those sectors to date. We've achieved a decarbonisation rate of just over 1%, but if we are to try and meet our 2030 emission reduction target and the shift carbon budget target, we have to quadruple the size of this emission reduction, and that's over an 8-year time, and the next 8 years. So we have to really accelerate. So let's try and see what this does mean for the different sectors of the economy. So this chart does indicate the past 8-year kind of changes. Okay, and this goes to about a reduction rate of 10% of 10% per year, and you can see how successful we've been in different parts of the economy. So we've had really big reductions for the electricity supply of about kind of 8% annually, but that isn't reflected in other sectors of the economy. And if you do have a look at the agriculture and type ones and the kind of building type ones, they really haven't been very large at all. They've been smaller than about 1%. and and this is where we think as a committee that they're capable of achieving, and this is what the government's own delivery ideas are about the emission reductions they want to achieve. And you can see for all these sectors the big changes that we want to increase, and that the government does want to increase the activity. Okay, so what we've analysed as a committee is to try and look at current government policy and have a look at where the policy gaps are currently. The green policies are where we think the government does currently get sufficient policies in place with it. The kind of yellow colour are some policies, and the red colour is where we think there are insufficient policies. And you can see, if you look at the electricity supply, we think the government pretty much does have sufficient policy levers and ideas to decarbonise. There have been some recent government progress, in fact, despite some of the recent kind of rhetoric from government. They have still gone ahead with the ZEV kind of mandate, which is a mandate on manufacturers to produce a certain number of EVs annually, and that has de-risked some of the policy for transport schemes. They've also cut the subsidy on installing air source heat kind of pumps and things as well, and there's a slightly de-risked the kind of building industry sector, but you can see that pretty off track, and you can see for policies like agriculture and town policies, there aren't sufficient policies there going on. So what we try and do as a committee, and this I think is where we like to see your input, is that we have tried to develop this methodology of indicators. So we have if you go to the CCC website, we have produced this open access kind of methodology of all the different indicators to track. So we not only want to track the emission reductions, we also want to track things like the number of heat pump installers, and all the different type of indicators for all the different sectors of the economy. And this gives us an example of where we think they're on track and where they're not on track. And you can see there are some surprising things that perhaps you wouldn't necessarily kind of think that is going on. So you can see that, in fact, if you look at livestock numbers, they are in fact going down in the country because people are changing their diets. And this is something that is occurring without any government policy at all. You know, there's no policy there, but that's on track anyway. But then you can see things that ought to be occurring because they're very cost effective, but they aren't occurring. And one I like to talk about are the number of sales of electric fans. This ought to be cost effective for companies to buy an electric fans, but it just is not occurring. I just wanted to show my last slide on this kind of cost of the net zero transition. This is something that gets talked about everywhere, and it often gets talked about in a really confusing way. You see different numbers going around, like 28 billion, of course, but then one can trillion as well, and it's very hard to often understand the kind of context in the way the costs are reported and communicated. So I think the more we can work together to really contextualize the costs correctly and to talk about it in a consistent way, I think it will really benefit everyone. But of course, you can always trust a kind of journalist who really can pick up on that, and they have their own opinion. But I don't want to show you the analysis we did for the kind of sixth carbon budget. We are currently working on the seventh carbon budget, and we are going to be looking at the cost again. We're going to be looking at the cost far more kind of carefully, and we're going to be looking at what amount of kind of public investment and what amount of private investment. But the whole story about the net zero transition, I think, is really the story of economic opportunities, that you have an upfront investment, and that is a significant investment, and that are the lines above the kind of zero axis, and you can see it is significant. It has to be started at the beginning, but that investment will make our economy work more efficiently. So we ought to get the operating cost benefit that comes with that, and that increases over time. So it will ultimately be beneficial for the economy, but it's an upfront investment cost. But I think people are really obsessed by this cost. But I wanted to talk about the cost in action, to go back to what I said at the beginning, because if we don't address climate change, if we don't properly adapt to climate change that will occur, if we don't support decarbonisation of other countries internationally, we're going to be really hit by the huge economic costs that come with climate impacts that are really a lot bigger than the 1 or 2% of GDP that is required to invest in the net zero transition. So that's me.
Tony may object, but I would like to open it up to a few questions.
Yeah, I'm sorry if I went too long. I'm sorry.
Not at all, at all. I just wanted to ask a general one, because of course what the government is talking about, certainly what Europe is talking about, and the government might adopt that as well, is the carbon adjustment mechanism. And does that come at all into your calculations?
Absolutely does. Yeah, and it is something we're supportive of. I think when you see changes like happening in Talbot and things, you know, we have to work as hard as possible to align with the EU countries as much as possible, and there is a certain protection to our own industry, like the building of EV cars and things, and you have to give businesses and these brand new green industries the confidence to invest in this country, and there are the job opportunities, but I think without something like the border adjustments, you aren't going to be able to realise the opportunities to give the business the confidence to invest. So I think the more we can do to align that with the EU, and the more we can do with fit the ETS is one more thing where we have to try and align that with the EU, and it really does come under our kind of purview. Yeah.
Yeah, but politically that's becoming quite a hot potato.
Indeed, yeah.
With loads of rival factions, even within the Conservative Party, not wanting it, and loads of others. So it's a bit of so the final one from me, if I may, and open it up, is if you look at the longer term, which you're doing. I mean, obviously, if that type of energy that we produce comes from natural sources and it becomes a lot cheaper, doesn't you would need to continue incentivizing, or at least build it in the private sector on which you depend, as you said to us, to invest. So that's a huge cost, possibly to the consumer. Which have you? I presume you build all that in as well in terms
That's
of
right. Yeah. So what we're going to do for the kind of heaven carbon budget, we're going to try and do almost two reports. We're going to do one report on what we think are the alternative kind of pathways, but we're then going to be one report that looks objectively as possible at the different kind of policy alternatives. What I think we aren't going to do is we aren't going to present just one kind of policy option to government. We're not going to tell them that's what you should be doing. We're going to try and give them a range of different options. So we're going to try and look at those policy options, if they're progressive or regressive, and what are the effect on different demographies. So we're going to try and look at that, and what amount have to come from the public purse, and what amount come from the private sector investment, and the way that might change over time. So we're going to try and do that work, and it'd be good to get all you guys involved in that. And the other brief thing to say is if you do have a look at how quickly things have to accelerate and we reach that 2030 target, we are going to have to see elements of the carrot and the stick. We both need the carrot and the stick to try and get those on track.
Thank you. Yes, Tony.
Yes, sorry. As a statistician, interested in measurement, and you put a chart, wonderful chart there with lots and lots of things apparently you intend to measure.
Yeah, we do.
Number of vans, electric vans, etc., etc.
Yeah.
Do you have a budget for that measurement? Who do you expect to gather those statistics on your behalf? Is it going to be the Office of National Statistics, or
yeah?
Can better statistics do
it? Yeah. So it will be good to get input. Well, they do come from lots of different things. So quite a lot of the numbers do come from the kind of government. So we try as much as possible to use the government own kind of numbers and kind of put them right back at them. But that's not for all of these. So some come from different bodies, and some we really can struggle to get, and some we would really like to have indicators, but we can't get out and kind of find them. So it would be good. So sometimes we have indicators that are sort of related to what we want, but they aren't quite what we want, just because we can't go and find what we want in the public domain. So it would be good to have more conversation with better statistics, with the ONS and with the kind of OBR and other organisations that probably all in the room. Yeah. So we do have all the details on the website, and we try and have these stakeholder conversations to really try and build up this complex kind of methodology, and we did it first for the six carbon budget and the kind of progress report, and we are trying to steadily improve it over time.
That's great. Jill, you want to come in?
Piers, to what degree do you think that the government might be using the net zero rhetoric with their key purpose of actually growing the economy? And just to explain that,
Yeah.
you mentioned upgrading assets, and of course we ultimately need to do that, but there's this huge drive for electric cars. If you need to change your car, you do a lot of mileage, then obviously. But I know personally several people, my age group, i.e. elderly, that are quite wealthy and have bought electric vehicles, quite substantial electric vehicles, because they are wealthy, because they honestly thought they were doing their bit. And all they've done is bought a vehicle with a whole load of embodied carbon that they'll never ever offset in their lifetime. That's the sort of messaging we're getting from government quite often. And you know, in lots of instances, upgrading assets isn't the right thing to do now.
You do raise a very important point there that refers to the embodied kind of carbon. I think it's a bit of a double. You have to be very kind of careful, and I think we're careful about that as a committee too. But because you can't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. I mean, we do have to transition all the sectors of the economy, and if you think too much about what those embodied emissions are, in that you have one hand tied behind your back. And the other thing is, we do expect, if we successfully decarbonise the economy, those embodied carbon emissions should come down. Like, you can get EVs today that are produced in very low carbon gigafactories, and we are trying to produce things like decarbonized kind of cement. So I think it's more effective to talk about, you have to try and decarbonize everything. And I think when we decarbonize everything, you really can then build the infrastructure, and that infrastructure build will ultimately improve the economy, so it is pretty worth it. But on your particular point, we are encouraging more incentives to buy a tinier electric car or to get out of your car. So I think these are things we need to kind of target too.
But as part of what you said about they will become more environmentally friendly to build later,
Yeah.
again, later
Yeah.
than this.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very
Yeah.
good point. Yes, please.
Simple question. I'm Nigel Jacklin. I'm
Hi, Nigel.
representing farmers later. My reading of your charts is that the easy bit has been done at 1.4% a year, and that the difficult bit is to come at 4.4%. So have we done the low-hanging fruit, and now we're going to have a bit of a problem, especially given that public opinion is divided?
I do think farming and land use is such an important topic to properly address, and I think we need to do it in the roundabout food production. That speaks to the kind of border adjustment type kind of mechanisms, and also the nature-based solution. We have to talk more about what goes exactly where, and kind of what we do where, kind of where do we grow our food crops, where do we grow our energy crops for bioenergy, and then where do we do more restorative woodland kind of with kind of peatland restoration. And you can see the things like Hugh Woodland can peatland restoration and the anaerobic digestion. They're all really quite far behind the curve, and I think we have to try to pull it because I'm actually can farm as well by background, and I think they're a heavily subsidised industry, and we're going to have to continue to kind of subsidise them to really, but to do different things than they do. So I think we have to bite the bullet as the cost of the transition, because we're not going to do it kind of without them really.
Thank you very much. I think
Right.
probably have
I
to. Oh,
talk-
there is one more. Although we're running out of time, but yes, quickly.
Sorry, just quickly, Bits. Thank you very much for your presentation. Can I just ask you, when you deal with government, do you see a grand strategy? Or do you see a sort of fragmented and
It had to come.
Because what I'd expect to see for this is something akin to the American spending on defence and space in the 50s and 60s, which basically forming the foundations for the success of their tech industry now. Do you see that, or do you see, cherry picking?
That's a very interesting question, and the answer is yes. I do see a bit of one, and that comes from the fact the whole with the way that climate change can act and our committee works. We're one of the only countries in the world that has such a powerful committee structure, and the government have to respond to our advice, and if they don't hit the kind of targets, they get threatened by court cases, and there are court cases happening today, and that's a threat to government. And so I think in all the conversations with government, they do have that legal kind of challenge, that legal framework at the kind of back. So perhaps they're not as strategic as they should be, but I think that does set a kind of longer term kind of strategy for this. That a lot of other things the government do, they do not have those. So I think we're one of the few places where there is one, but that isn't often reflected in their day-to-day conversations. So I think they have their day-to-day thing they're working on and their kind of priorities. But I think we do have a strategy there looking at the back of their minds.
Well, that's reassuring. Okay, well, thank
Okay.
you very much indeed.
Yeah.
And